It didn't begin under bright ring lights, but amid the haze of a crowded press room heavy with cigarette smoke and ambition. When the door swung open, a brash newcomer strode forward, crisp suit unruffled, hands clenched at his sides, and leaned into the microphone. "Muhammad Ali is a coward," he declared, his words slicing the air like a punch. Cameras snapped in unison. Ali, seated at the edge of the stage, didn't flinch, his gaze fixed on the intruder as if already knowing what the rest could not see. Headlines exploded. Voices clamored for scandal and revolution in boxing, yet none grasped the power of the silence that followed. When that night's first bell rang and Ali lifted his arms, he froze mid-celebration, and in that unexpected stillness, even the New York Times reporter fell silent. The roar of camera shutters clashed with murmurs and coughs, each snap carving the thick haze of tobacco smoke that clung to the carpeted floor. Bright spotlights swung in lazy arcs overhead, their pools of white light slicing through drifting tendrils of fog. Reporters in dark suits and loud ties jockeyed for the best angles, pressing microphones forward like tiny lances. Fans pressed behind barricades, eager for the first glimpse of the legends they'd heard about on radio and seen in grainy magazine photos. This was the Civic Center in Las Vegas, 1975. Glittering neon outside, electric anticipation inside. A hush rippled through the crowd as Bob, the Hammer Carter, swaggered to the podium. He wore a pencil-thin mustache and a polyester suit with wide lapels that caught the light in flashes of orange and brown. His eyes, hawkish and bright, scanned the room like a general ordering his troops. He leaned forward, elbows braced on polished wood, and delivered his opening salvo in a voice smooth as velvet but edged with challenge. "Ladies and gentlemen," he drawled, "they say Ali's the greatest of all time. But tonight, this little man from Detroit will show you a new definition of power. He's got speed, he's got heart, and he's got ambition. Your hero has grown soft." Laughter bubbled at the back of the hall, punctuated by scattered applause. Cameras swung toward Muhammad Ali's corner, but he remained still, a silent phantom in white trousers and a black silk shirt, collar open. His hands hung loosely at his sides, fingers curling and uncurling in time with his steady breath. Sweat gleamed on his brow despite the air conditioning's hum. He said nothing, yet every cell in his body hummed with readiness. When Carter's grin faltered for a fraction of a heartbeat, it was Ali's eyes, cool, unblinking, that took the whisper of attention. Carter paced a slow circle, each footstep a muted thud on the stage floor. He reached down to a silver tray that held 2 water glasses and a slender pitcher filled with ice cubes that rattled like tiny percussion. Lifting the pitcher, he splashed water into one glass and lifted it toward Ali's corner as if to toast. "Here's to you, champ," he said. "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. We'll see if your wings can carry you tonight." The microphone squealed at the back, and Ali's trainer, Henry Slim Johnson, hissed through gritted teeth to the sound technician, "Cut that feed." But the grin on Carter's face widened. He thrived on every crackle of feedback. He backed away, straightened his tie, and spat out what he thought would be the killer line. "I hear your rep is built on talk and theatrics, Ali. Tonight, we separate the real from the myth." Silence clung to Ali like a cloak. Even the jazz murmuring from a hidden speaker off stage seemed to pause. The only sound was the drip of condensation from a stray ice cube that tumbled onto the wood and rolled, lost across the podium. Reporters leaned forward, camera lenses whirred. Carter waited for Ali to flinch, to strike back with a quip, to sputter indignation. Instead, Ali stepped forward, his bare feet whispering against the polished riser. Heat rose in the room as he approached the microphone. The crowd held its breath. Carter's smug grin quivered. Ali's fingers brushed the silver stand as though testing its strength. faces blurred in the lights. A distant click of a camera shutter sounded like a gunshot. Ali's jaw set. He uncrossed his arms, lifted his chin, and opened his mouth, only to close it again, maintaining perfect silence. The room stilled around him. Every head turned, every breath held captive in his quiet. Carter's triumphant posture flickered, off balance, as if he'd been asked to stand on shifting ground. Reporters exchanged puzzled glances, pens hesitated, recorders beeped in confusion. The power had shifted without a single word. In that pregnant instant, Ali controlled every eye, every heartbeat in the hall. He turned away slowly, lifted a single hand in a serene wave of acknowledgement, and retreated from the podium. The hush broke like a storm surge, applause, cheers, whistles, but none could recapture the electric charge of that silent statement. In the space where words failed, Ali had spoken volumes. The locomotive's whistle split the humid night as Ali stepped onto the platform, the low roar of wheels over steel echoing off brick walls. Street lamps outside the station cast long, wavering shadows across the concrete, making the sleeping city appear suspended between two worlds. He carried nothing but a leather duffel, no entourage, no flashing bulbs, its strap cutting into his shoulder through the light fabric of his white sports shirt. Passengers scuttled past in slacks and muted coats. A conductor with a battered cap offered a nod before disappearing into the engine's heat. Inside the train car, vinyl seats were worn thin, the metal frames warm under his palm. He slid in beside a window and pressed his forehead against the cool glass. Neon signs from the streetcars flickered across the panes like distant stars. The red, "Departing soon" board overhead buzzed intermittently. He closed his eyes, listening to the click of the door sealing, the soft hiss of air brakes releasing. Somewhere ahead, Chicago's skyline must still be burning with early evening lights, but here it was already deep twilight. A porter rattled past with a tea trolley, offering a nod and the clink of a porcelain cup. Ali shook his head, only his lips moving. The train lurched once, twice, and then slipped into motion. At that moment, his heart hammered not from adrenaline, but from a sense of destiny shifting. He peered at his reflection, lean, determined features set firm beneath a short crop of hair, lines of experience around the eyes. He remembered the note in the envelope. "Meet me. One last round." And the name, David Renshaw, on the seal. He traced that name with his fingertip, recalling a younger face, steady hands that had argued on his behalf in a courtroom long ago. No cameras had witnessed that event. No stadium had cheered. Yet Renshaw's belief had granted him a second chance. The train rolled through dark fields, punctuated by the occasional glow of small towns. Exhaust from the diesel engine filtered through open vents, carrying with it dust and the faint tang of fuel. Ali inhaled deeply. Each breath tasted of possibilities. He unzipped the duffel, revealing the worn canvas gloves he had used in his very first professional bout. Scuffs and faded chalk dust marked their surfaces. He lifted them reverently, thumbed the faded lacing, then laid them carefully to one side. Tonight, he reminded himself, wasn't about spectacle or reclaiming glory. It was a solemn duty, an unadvertised encounter born of gratitude and unspoken debt. At Detroit's Grand Central Station, the terminal's arched ceiling loomed like a cathedral roof. Velvet benches stood vacant beneath windows etched with grime. A single newsstand flickered a neon open sign. Ali strode through, coat collar turned up against the cool air. He paid no heed to headlines trumpeting his upcoming return to the ring in Las Vegas. Instead, he climbed into a cab and simply said, "To the Michigan Central Hotel." The driver, a stocky man with a radio earpiece, cracked the window against the night chill, letting in the scent of rain that had fallen an hour before. The hotel's lobby was a hush of gold-toned marble and mahogany paneling. Allie nodded to the clerk, whose eyes widened at the unannounced arrival of a champion. He flashed a room key without remark, mounted the elevator, and drifted to room 417. Inside, he dropped onto the bed and sat, legs dangling, gloves still on the floor. The room's single lamp cast a mellow glow on a telephone and an ashtray filled with butts. He switched on the bedside radio, nothing but distant static and the soft crackle of a jazz quartet. His reflection in the oval mirror above the dresser showed a man poised at a crossroads. Before dawn, he slipped out in loafers and a khaki jacket. The streets were empty save for the rumble of early commuters and the hiss of steam rising from sidewalk vents. East End Gym stood at the end of a narrow alley, a squat brick building bearing a faded sign. He entered through the back door, greeted by the scent of sweat, rosin, and leather. The lone punching bag in the center of the ring swung gently from a single chain, spokes of fluorescent light dancing across its surface. Allie wrapped his hands in plain cloth strips, ignoring the insulated vinyl rolls stacked neatly in the corner. He began his routine, a jab to warm up, then a steady rhythm of crosses and hooks, each blow thudding into the bag with intent. No music, no crowd, just the reverberation of impact. His coach, Old Joe, shuffled in from the shadows, perched on the edge of the ring apron. Rather than intervene, Joe simply nodded and watched. Around them, the walls were plastered with yellowed flyers from local fights and photos of past champions whose names few remembered. After several minutes, sweat beading at his temples, Allie paused. He surveyed the trainers' chairs, the dusty mirrors, the frayed rope corners. Carefully, he reached under the ring and retrieved a small canvas satchel. From it, he extracted the identical gloves from his duffel, pristine, new, bearing the insignia of his sponsor. He set them beside the old pair, a silent testament to his journey from novice to legend, and now to a man on a mission of personal reckoning. In the gray light of early morning, he rose and walked to the door without looking back. The echoes of his footfalls faded down the hallway, leaving the ring empty once more. The world outside was waking, ready to greet headlines and hype. But inside these walls, a different story had just begun, one known only to Allie and the man he was about to see. The lights in Detroit Civic Arena dimmed briefly before the flood of spotlights roared back to life, bathing the ring in harsh white glow that pancaked the shadows against the canvas. The crowd's roar rose like a tide, 30,000 souls packed into concrete tiers, the stink of sweat, cigarette ash, and spilled beer hanging thick in the air. Allie stepped through the ropes without his usual flourish, his feet sliding over the taut canvas in worn leather boots. His shoulders were squared, his gaze fixed on the opposite corner where David Renshaw stood waiting, pale under the glare, arms held low as though he bore some hidden burden heavier than the championship belt resting on his shoulder. Journalists lined the perimeter, notebooks poised, lenses trained, each click of the camera's shutter punctuating the anticipatory hum. The old public address announcer's voice rasped through crackling speakers, reciting heights, weights, and records, aliases and numbers that would quickly fade once the first blow fell. But something in Ali's stance betrayed him. The usual buoyant swagger was tucked away, replaced by deliberate stillness. Onlookers leaned forward in their seats, sipping stale air, not daring to breathe too deeply. Renshaw advanced first, his gloves raised in a tentative salute more than an attack. He moved with a jagged rhythm, as though every step cost him. His chest rose and fell in shallow gulps, his torso tensing then relaxing with uncanny resolve. Allie circled, pivoting on his lead foot, eyes never shifting from Renshaw's silhouette. Each rotation of the ring ropes created a faint whistle in the air, like a half-remembered melody. The moment stretched, and the first fighter's strike felt inevitable as sunrise. When the bell finally rang, it boomed through the arena like a cannon blast muted by gauze. The vacuum it left in its immediate wake was audibly filled by the echo of that single note. The crowd's roar dampened for just a heartbeat. Then, the second bell resounded, and the fight was on. Renshaw lunged forward, a straight right glancing off Ali's shoulder, the leather purring a sharp thwack. Ali absorbed the hit, his body unflinching, his mind tuning in to the subtlest feedback, how the punch's energy rippled through the canvas, how the canvas itself responded underfoot. He repositioned, nudging Renshaw off balance, his own fist a blur as it arced in a crisp jab that caught Renshaw on the upper arm. The crowd surged, chanting in unison, but Ali barely registered the swell. In that ringing chorus, he heard only the echo of his own heartbeat, the faint hiss of air slipping from Renshaw's lungs. A hook followed, Ali's knuckles brushing Renshaw's temple, but the blow was half-hearted. Renshaw's head snapped sideways, and Ali's gloved hand hung in the air a moment longer, as though evaluating some question too large for words. Renshaw retreated into a clinch, locking arms around Ali's torso. The noise of the audience dimmed to a murmur as both men grappled for leverage. Ali's breath hissed through his clenched teeth, the friction of glove against glove sounding like distant thunder. He felt Renshaw's heartbeat thrum against his chest, rapid, uneven, burdened by the secret that brought him here. Ali did not wrench free. Instead, he leaned in, letting Renshaw feel the immovable calm radiating from his form. Then he twisted, disengaged, and spun Renshaw away with such fluid force that the younger man stumbled back 2 paces. As Renshaw regained his footing, Ali lifted a single brow, a silent question. The tension coiled tighter than nerves of raw steel. Renshaw's eyes flicked from Ali's face to the ropes, as if seeking an escape. He raised his gloves again, not in aggression, but as a shield. The second half of the round passed in a series of half-measured strikes and evasions. Neither man sought to land a fight-ending blow. Each was probing, testing, feeling for the crack in the other's armor. When the bell sounded to end the round, applause thundered once more. Ali's corner sprang to life, slapping him with towels, urging water, murmuring strategy. But Ali turned first to Renshaw, standing on the opposite apron, his chest heaving beneath damp robes. Ali offered a nod, an acknowledgement that transcended victory or defeat. In that gesture lay respect, recognition of a test greater than mere competition. Renshaw responded by lifting a gloved hand to his brow, sweeping sweat to the side, a swift blink that spoke gratitude. As Ali settled back onto his stool, his coach pressed an ice pack to his cheek, the cold stinging against bruised skin. Ali winced only slightly, his mind still fixed on the electric moments of that round, on the weight of Renshaw's gaze and the fragile promise it held. Behind the curtain of cheers, behind the bright glare of arena lights, Ali understood the fight's true stakes. Not a belt, not a record, but the unspoken bond between 2 men who met in silence, spoke through gloves, and paused long enough to let meaning fill the space between them. The 7th round began with the ring work slowing to a crawl, every footstep echoing unnaturally in the arena's cavernous gloom. The noise of the crowd, once a thunderous roar, had withered to a low, puzzled murmur, cell phones forgotten on laps, beer cups hanging suspended mid-cheer. Ali drifted forward as though carried by an unseen current, his guard low, fists sagging at his waist. He did not move with the grace of precision. Rather, he prowled like a man drawn inexorably toward a truth he alone could wield. Carter lunged, a snapping combination that cleaved through the charged silence. Ali usurped the blow by leaning aside. The strike thundered into thin air. In that heartbeat of absence, every eye in the arena caught the smallest tremble of Ali's brow. He did not taste victory. He did not savor defeat. He simply observed, his gaze traveling the length of Carter's form, hungry, uncertain, on the ragged edge between compassion and resolve. At the bell's second clang, the crowd's reaction fractured. Some voices spat anger, others cried out confusion. How could Ali stand so still? The commentators fumbled for words. Did he just decide to? Their sentences vanished in midair, leaving only the thrum of overhead spotlights. In the corner, Carter's seconds hammered at his gloves, frantic. Finish him! Finish him! But Carter himself seemed petrified, as though the very act of striking carried a weight greater than any championship belt. When the eighth round commenced, Carter advanced with more desperation than aggression, wild hooks slicing through space but finding only breeze. Ali parried each with an effortless economy of motion. His right glove whispered against Carter's shoulder in a brush of contact so light it might have been a question. Carter froze, head cocked to one side. He blinked rapidly, the moisture glinting in the arena lights. Then, as if waking from a dream, he raised his arms in surrender, palms open, a gesture of both plea and capitulation. Ali's chest heaved not with exertion, but with a sudden tide of something he had not anticipated. He did not step in for a knockout. Instead, he backed off, dropping his gloves to his hips. The official hovered, mid-stride, uncertain whether to intervene. Carter sank onto one knee in the center of the ring, gloved hands resting on the canvas. His breath came in rasps that echoed like distant thunder. He did not press forward. He yielded. Ali crossed the ring in measured steps. Each footfall tapped the stretched canvas, punctuating the hush. When he reached Carter, he did not speak. He slid an arm under Carter's gloved wrist and raised it slowly. 1, 2, 3. The crowd, accustomed to spectacle, fell silent once more. In that quiet, cameras clicked, capturing the unrepeatable. Two fighters, at odds for 9 grueling rounds, now united in a suspended moment of understanding. "Why didn't you strike?" Carter whispered, voice strangled as Ali's hand hovered above him. The question was not addressed to the crowd. It belonged only to them. Ali pressed his thumb against Carter's glove, an imperceptible seal of solidarity. His own voice, when it came, was measured. "Because you're not here to fight," he said. "You're here because you needed to stop." The bell rang again, though no round remained, and Carter rose slowly, wiping sweat from his brow. Ali stepped back to the neutral corner. For a heartbeat, he allowed himself a glance at the first row. The old photographer who'd trailed him for decades, capturing every public conquest, now held his breath, still snapping film. No pretense of heroism crossed Ali's face, only the acceptance that tonight, the ring had served a purpose far removed from sport. Outside the ropes, the seconds unlatched gloves and draped towels over shoulders. Carter's team knelt beside him, murmuring concerns, but Carter raised a hand to still them. He nodded once toward Ali's corner, as though granting permission for both camps to lower their differences. Ali watched, arms folded, the weight of every round compressed into that single nod of respect. Backstage, amid the clamor of reporters and the flashing of bulbs, Ali did not offer a formal interview. He disappeared down a dim corridor, leading to a small room where Carter's father waited, a tall man in a battered suit, his face drawn and weary. The elder extended his hand without a word. Ali clasped it firmly, and in that grip, years of triumph and struggle passed between them. Carter stood in the doorway, helmet in hand, tears glistening on his eyelashes. His gaze met Ali's, and for once, words were needless. The story of bloodied gloves and fractured pride had been written, but its true conclusion lay in that wordless exchange, the realization that a fight could end not with defeat, but with mercy, and that true victory often comes when no one else is watching. He watched Carter lunge, the world narrowing to the sick gleam of polished gloves and the swift flight of a fist. But then, instead of returning the blow, he let his arm hang heavy at his side. The bell for the third round rang out, low and hollow as though muffled by cotton, and the crackle of the public address speaker sputtered to a halt. From that soundless void, the only thing left was Allie's own breath, measured and even, a steady tide against the dawn of something new. Carter halted mid-swing, his knuckles brushing air. The stadium lights froze him in a moment of reckless intent. Dozens of lenses spun to catch the drama, but no flash burst. The cameras hummed, powerless, and the ring became a crystal chamber in which every drop of sweat shimmered, every strand of hair trembled. The audience, thousands strong, held their silence as if caught in a spell. The ref, his hand poised to intervene, recoiled. There was no rule for this tableau, no instruction in any handbook for a pugilist who refuses to fight. Ali's gaze, sharp, unwavering, locked onto Carter's. He saw a sudden sliver of uncertainty in his opponent's eyes, a calculation that perhaps this wasn't the enemy he'd expected. In the charged pause that stretched beyond the length of any punch, Ali felt something akin to sorrow stir behind his own calm. The rattle of chains on the robe hooks backstage, the thud of heartbeats echoing in the corridors. Those sounds, though distant, seemed to outline the shape of a decision being made. He took a single step forward, the canvas creaking beneath his shoe. Carter's head dipped in unison, as though in recognition, and the world tilted ever so slightly. Ali extended his right glove, the leather worn and soft, towards the man who had come to face him tonight. His fingertips hovered, an invitation rather than a challenge. "It's not your time," he could have said. Instead, he offered a gesture of mercy, quiet but absolute. Carter's knees buckled and he dropped gracefully to one leg. The roar that finally welled up from the crowd was not triumphant. It was shaky, uncertain, an outpouring of collective relief. The cameras finally clicked their bulbs, bursts of white light frozen in time, and the ref blew his whistle in confusion. The bout, for all intents and purposes, was over. No knockout, no technical decision. Only the stillness that followed a tempest. Ali knelt beside Carter, slipping an arm beneath his shoulder. The fallen man did not slump. He steadied himself against Ali's support, though his breath came in ragged gasps. Around them, seconds moved in muted shock. Towels were flung with more urgency than any training drill. Water was poured over shaking heads. Ali pressed a gloved hand gently into Carter's back, not to push, but to steady, a silent vow that the fight had ended in more than a draw. Through the flickering glare of overhead lights, Ali caught the expression of the veteran ringside photographer, eyes wide, camera forgotten against his chest. In that look, Ali saw the enormity of what had unfolded. Two men who had come to obliterate each other, now bound by an unspoken pact of humanity. The referee waved an uncertain hand, then raised Ali's glove higher than any title belt could be held. The crowd stood, not in praise of violence, but in recognition of compassion. Up in the commentator's booth, mics snapped open, voices quivered with disbelief. "I've never," one stammered. "This is impossible," another gasped. They searched for words, but the echo of Ali's choice filled every aperture of the arena. The narrative had shifted from brawn to mercy, from spectacle to soul. Behind the curtain, Carter's father stood silhouetted against the exit light, a rigid figure softened by the fact that his son, at 18 and burdened by forces beyond his control, had been spared a shattering defeat. Ali released Carter's arm and rose. High above the ring, the scoreboard flickered out. No winner, no loser. Merely the momentary blaze of a truth rarer than any championship. Ali walked to the ropes, soaking in the hush. Each footstep was a testament. You may train your body to strike, but your heart to hesitate is where real victory begins. In that silent interval, longer than any round, yet briefer than a breath, the essence of strength had revealed itself. As he stepped through the ropes, away from the glare and into the quiet corridor, Ali carried with him more than a memory. He carried a promise. That mercy, once shown, echoes louder than any chorus of acclaim. The first blow he refrained from landing rang with significance far beyond the ring, carving a space where dignity could stand unbroken, even when fists were raised. The morning sun had barely breached the horizon when Ali's car rolled up to the weathered brick facade of the old Miami gym. The iron door swung open with a protest, and he stepped inside unannounced, his gloves slung over one shoulder, the canvas bag beside him muted by scuffed soles. A dull bustle of leather on leather sounded as he entered the cavernous space. Its ceiling hung low with rusted beams, the tile floor slick with yesterday's perspiration. Mirrors lining the walls bore cracks like lightning scars, reflecting a dozen heavy bags swaying under the strain of countless blows. He moved to the center of the room, where the ring stood framed by frayed ropes and battered turnbuckles. No announcer's fanfare greeted him here, only the hum of flickering fluorescent tubes and the soft thump of gloves pummeling hides. His trainer, an ex-light heavyweight named Angelo the Maven Santos, had already begun his morning routine, checking tape on wrists, scanning the gym for safety hazards, adjusting speed bag straps. Santos glanced up, eyebrows barely raised, as Ali unzipped his bag. Newspaper clippings fluttered out, headlines nodding toward Ali's refusal to snarl at Carter during last night's press conference. The ink was still fresh, the words bruising. Muhammad Ali, silent on provocation. No show punch? Yet here, in this sanctum of sweat and grit, Ali crumpled the paper into a ball and dropped it at his trainer's feet. The silence between them carried more tension than any roar of the crowd. He donned his gloves. Leather creaked like an old gate. Santos paced around him, measuring his protégé's stance. "No theatrics today," he murmured, voice gravelly. "Just work." Ali nodded once, then squared up to a hanging bag the size of a tumbling scarecrow. His first jab was past perfect, quick, precise, retracting before the bag could swing backward. The second shot, the cross, came with the same economy, his hip pivoting just so, toes gripping the floorboards. Each strike was more than muscle memory. It was an argument made with fist and forearm. No flourish, no showboating. He shadowboxed next, flowing through openings, parrying invisible hooks, the ghost of Carter's swing drifting through his mind. He allowed himself a half-smile in the mirror's broken reflection, a soldier observing his own drill, methodical and unblinking. A young boxer, tall and gangly, slipped in through the doorway. He wore the bright colors of Carter's fan club, orange vinyl tracksuit, brand new gloves. The kid slung his bag on a hook and swaggered toward Ali, vying for attention. All that talk about mercy. "You gonna show it tonight, champ?" he jeered, voice too loud for the hush. He tapped his gloves together, challenged the air. Ali stopped mid-strike, letting the leather fall idle. Sweat traced lines down his temples. He didn't turn, didn't speak. He felt the boy's agitation ripple through the ring floor, urgent as distant sirens. Instead of answering, Ali resumed his rhythm, each hit a pulse of intent. Jab, step, hook, pivot. The youngster's smirk faltered. The beat of the canvas beneath Ali's feet sounded like slow drums, commanding and relentless. After a dozen rounds on the bag, Ali moved to the speed bag, his fists a blur. The leather clapped again and again, uncurling tension with each crisp pop. Santos stood close enough to catch stray punches, but far enough to let Ali own the space. The flicker of neon from the single window nearby painted the scene in flickering blues. 1974, Miami, a world away from glare of Vegas lights. When the bag finally slowed, Ali eased back to the ring's edge, grabbing a towel. He wiped at his brow, the muslin cloth growing damp in seconds. The young apprentice approached, still blinking in the dim light. Ali offered him the towel, the gesture unadorned but unmistakable. The boy reached out, surprised, and took it. His eyes flicked upward, confusion overtaking bravado. In that moment, the gym door rattled. Reporters out front, their cameras already rolling in the parking lot. Santos scowled, knowing the headlines would find them soon, but Ali only shrugged, raising a single gloved hand in a loose wave. No speech, no proclamation. He knew that words spoken in such places, under harsh floods of bulbs, could box him in. Here, in the sanctuary of leather and sweat, his actions spoke more eloquently than any interview. As he walked past the heavy bags toward the exit, a fellow trainee called out, "See you tonight, champ." Ali paused, turned, and in a voice soft but firm replied, "I'll be there." No hint of fear, no truce. Just a promise carried on breath that smelled of salt and effort. Then he stepped back into the hum of the city, leaving the gym behind like a ring of whispered secrets, undisclosed, unclaimed, yet forever theirs.